They said it was just a routine handover. But when the storage collapsed hours after I left, I realized routine doesn't ask for silence when the inspector walks in. The lights in the hallway had that cold, blue-white tone only government buildings or dying startups chose. Ours was the latter. Every morning, I passed the same crooked poster on the wall. Innovate like nobody's watching. A joke, considering how many eyes were always on me, especially hers. Interns usually arrived invisible, coffee runners, PowerPoint fixers, spreadsheet ghosts, but she walked in on day one like she had a contract with fate. Clean pressed shirt, vintage watch, and the confidence of someone who thought 3 months in this office would catapult her into a VC-funded orbit. It wasn't the confidence that bothered me. It was how quickly people fell in love with it. She laughed at the director's dry jokes. She fixed someone's broken Excel formula during an all-hands. She stayed late, performatively, strategically, just enough for others to notice. Within 2 weeks, I heard someone say, "She's sharp, ahead of her time." By the end of month 2, the director had assigned her to shadow me. Shadow. As if 5 years of systems architecture could be absorbed like a vitamin D under fluorescent light. She followed me into the server rooms, took notes during our vendor calls, nodded thoughtfully while I laid out the risk mitigation model for the legacy storage framework. But I knew. She wasn't listening. She was collecting. Pieces, phrases, approval. And then came the meeting. The director invited us both. Odd, since I usually presented system stability updates alone. But there she was, seated already, her hands folded, a glint in her eye that didn't belong to someone still technically on probation. When the screen flickered to life, it was my slide deck, but not in my voice. "Thank you, Director," she began smoothly. "We've identified a potential cost-saving shift in the storage scheme. A new hybrid cloud layer could reduce downtime risk and budget overhead by 23%, assuming migration begins Q3. I blinked. Those were my numbers, my scenario models, the ones I had run but rejected due to structural integrity issues. I hadn't shown them, not to her, not to anyone. My eyes darted to the director. He nodded slowly, clearly impressed. "She's ahead, even after 5 months," he murmured, unaware his voice was caught in the room's acoustics. Or maybe he wanted me to hear. I didn't speak. I didn't interrupt. Not because I agreed, but because something inside me snapped into stillness. After the meeting, I sat at my desk. The hum of air conditioning, the soft clatter of distant keyboards, the echo of betrayal disguised as competence. I opened my folder, typed one line. "Resignation, effective today." I printed it, folded it, and walked. As I handed the letter to HR, the intern passed by with a coffee. I caught her eye. She smiled, not smug, not cruel, just sure. 3 hours later, the alert came in. Storage failure detected. The inspection was called within the hour. I didn't speak to anyone, but I waited, because I knew exactly what the inspector would ask, and I knew who had no answers. She wanted my spotlight, but she never read the warnings in the shadows. And what happened when the inspector asked the first question? You won't believe who went silent first. The news spread faster than policy memos ever did. By the time I got home, the group chat of ex-employees was already alive. Screenshots, timestamps, blurry photos of the fire suppression lights blinking red in the data wing. One message stood out. "Storage is gone, inspectors inside, directors not answering." I stared at the screen. 5 months. 5 months of gentle grooming, of quiet silencing, of being passed over while someone else rehearsed my lines. And in 3 hours, all it took was one misstep, one unreviewed approval, for it to start unraveling. At 6:17 p.m., I got the call. Not from the director, from someone I hadn't expected. "Hey," came the shaky voice. "It's Jules, from Ops." Jules had always stayed out of the inner loops, too smart to play office politics, too tired to try, but now, his voice cracked with urgency. "They're pulling logs. Storage collapsed, and no one can explain why the hybrid schema didn't have redundancy. They're saying it was approved in a closed loop, but your name isn't on the sign-off list." I felt the old reflex, the need to fix, to protect, to save the system, even after it had spit me out. I took a breath. "And?" I asked. And the inspector asked one question, Jules said, barely above a whisper. He looked right at her and said, "Who designed this?" She looked, lost. Said it was a team decision. But then the director didn't back her. He said he hadn't reviewed it, just greenlit the initiative based on her memo. My chest tightened, not from vindication, but from something colder. The recognition of a familiar pattern. The intern's plan had gotten her applause. But the collapse? That belonged to no one. Are they pulling the backups? I asked. Jules exhaled. That's the thing. The backups routed through your old architecture. The old system triggered fallback. Your system. A pause. It saved everything. I blinked. You're saying the system didn't fail? No, the new layer failed. Your legacy fallback kicked in just in time. But none of the execs understand how that even happened. They thought it was already deprecated. I leaned back in my chair, a bitter taste rising in my throat, because I knew exactly what had happened. The intern had copied the model, not the safeguards. She had repackaged it for approval, trimmed the unnecessary redundancies, and called it streamlined. But she didn't realize those redundancies were the spine. And the director? He had seen confidence, not competence. Now the inspector was inside, and there were logs. Not emotional debates, not opinions, just entries. Who edited what? Who signed what? Who skipped reviews? And the worst part? My name wasn't on any of it. Do you want me to tell them you're available for a statement? Jules asked gently. They're trying to figure out how the fallback worked. No, I said, because I knew better. Let them talk. Let them search. Let them retrace every step I had already warned about. This time, I wouldn't fix what they broke. I had already written the manual. They chose not to read it. She thought my silence was surrender. But silence holds records. Silence holds proof. You'd think that would be enough. But what the inspector uncovered next, it didn't just shift blame. It exposed something much bigger. If you've ever been overlooked while someone else took credit, hit that subscribe button. This story is just getting started. The inspector's shoes made no sound as he moved through the corridor, but his silence was louder than anyone else's voice that day. They had cleared the operations floor. Emergency protocol. Everyone was told to work from home until further notice, but most hovered in Zoom calls or hovered near Slack like moths to a porch light, hoping for updates or scapegoats. Inside, the director sat with his jacket off, sleeves rolled to the elbows like he was still trying to convince someone he was hands-on. Across from him sat the inspector, crisp white shirt, pen gliding across a tablet. She sat between them, the intern, no longer the confident strategist with slide decks and initiative, now just a girl in an oversized office chair, clutching a thermos she hadn't sipped from in over an hour. He asked the question again. Walk me through the storage scheme approvals. Who finalized the config? She opened her mouth, closed it, then shifted her eyes to the director, but the director wasn't looking at her. He was studying a timestamp on the screen. Your system pulled fallback at 17:32:09, the inspector noted. The collapse triggered at 17:31:54. There's a 15-second discrepancy. The director frowned. That can't be right. We disabled the legacy fallback. You disabled the UI access. The inspector replied smoothly. Not the automation rule in the back end. Someone coded it to activate if failure thresholds passed 0.8%. He turned the screen. Line after line of terminal logs, all from my old scripts. The intern leaned forward. But that wasn't in the migration report. That rule shouldn't have been active. The inspector didn't flinch. Because the migration report was written off your proposal, and your pull request, the one that edited the fallback configs, was never merged. Silence. The director shifted in his seat. That's impossible. I thought we approved the switch. The inspector gave a polite smile, the kind you give someone seconds before handing them something heavy. You approved her proposal, but the implementation was never completed, which means your signature is on a strategy that wasn't technically in effect. She ran a presentation. The execution never cleared QA, no peer reviews, no staging verification, nothing. The director's jaw tightened. The inspector continued. So, in short, the collapse happened under a half-implemented plan without audit based on a visual summary, and it was caught by an old system no one reviewed because he tapped the screen, because someone marked it legacy, safe to deprecate after Q3. He let the silence sit for a moment, then asked, Who wrote that note? The intern's voice cracked. I think I did, but I thought, you thought it was safe, the inspector said, because you assumed the director had verified the merge. The director stiffened. I don't approve Git merges. That's DevOps. The inspector raised an eyebrow. But your initials are in the approval column. That's when the room changed. The fluorescent lights felt colder. The AC clicked louder. The kind of silence where everyone hears their own heartbeat, or conscience. The director shifted. Well, yes, I approve the plan, not the code. That's different. The inspector's tone didn't change. But your signature is on the risk waiver, and the waiver was for a system change. The intern whispered something. No one heard it. She tried again. I just followed the model she showed me. She had it in her drafts. I assumed it was ready. The inspector tilted his head. She? My mentor, she said. The one who left. My name wasn't spoken, but it was in the air now, heavy, present, undeniable. While they scrambled for footing, I sat at a quiet cafe near the old tram line. Steam curled from a cup I hadn't ordered yet. The barista knew me. She brought it anyway. I opened my laptop. My inbox had 16 unread messages, 6 from HR, 3 from legal, 1 from the director. Subject, request for clarification, legacy storage architecture. I didn't open it. Not yet. Because I wasn't ready to explain why I had built a safety net even for the ones who didn't believe I'd ever need it. Some systems crash, others fall back, and a few expose what was never stable in the first place. The director's email sat unopened like a fragile object you're not sure is a gift or a bomb. Its subject line didn't blink, didn't scream, didn't apologize. It just waited, like he was sure I'd read it, like he still assumed I owed him something. But I wasn't in that office anymore. The sun was bleeding out over the skyline when I finally clicked. The cafe buzzed with quiet conversations and spoons against ceramic. But for a moment, the world narrowed to the lines on my screen. We may need a quick sync re-storage incident. Legal is compiling a timeline. There's reference to scripts you authored in 2021. Can you confirm if the auto fallback you designed was still active by design? Still active by design, as if I hadn't spent weeks documenting every corner case, every alert condition, as if my architectural notes weren't already archived, color-coded and tagged with "do not delete" in 3 languages, as if they hadn't signed off on phasing out something they barely understood. I didn't reply, not because I was angry, but because I finally wasn't. At 8:40 a.m. the next morning, the legal department's automated calendar pinged me with a meeting invite. 30 minutes, no agenda, just clarification on legacy fallback logic. Clicking decline had never felt so delicious. But by 9:15, my phone vibrated again, not from them. From someone else I hadn't expected, the intern. Her message came through plain. No emojis, no subject line fluff. Hi, I know you don't owe me anything, but I didn't realize how much I was copying until everything broke. I thought I was building on your work. I didn't know I was erasing it. If there's a chance to talk, I'll be at the back of the library at noon. No pressure. The library, she remembered. It was the only quiet space left in that open-plan office hellscape. The one room with no Slack pings, no director hovering, no passive-aggressive HR posters about toxic silence. Just cold bookshelves, stale carpet, and one outlet that always sparked if you didn't plug your charger in just right. I showed up at 12:06, not to be polite, but to be clear. I wasn't rushing for anyone anymore. She was already there, sitting on the bench under the giant fake ficus, her laptop closed. She looked smaller, less composed, or maybe just real. I didn't know the fallback was still live, she said as I sat. You didn't ask. She nodded. I thought the director had already reviewed everything. I smiled, thin and tired. He doesn't review. He promotes what sounds good in meetings. She winced. I see that now. There was a pause, the kind that asks a question without forming it. You didn't build something, I said. You mirrored a structure you didn't test. You skipped the load triggers, the fail thresholds. You copied the frame, but left the safety net. That's not innovation. That's theater. I know. I raised an eyebrow. She held my gaze. I know, she repeated, and I'm not trying to get out of it. But I wanted you to know, when the inspector asked who designed the scheme, I didn't answer, because it wasn't mine. It was an echo. That word landed harder than I expected. Echo. Because maybe that's what most offices are. People echoing the loudest voice in the room, hoping volume will pass for value. I learned from you, she said quietly, but I never gave credit. I only took what made me look smart. At least she was honest now, braver than the director who still hadn't followed up. She stood. If you don't want to speak again, I get it, but thank you for the fallback. Her voice cracked just slightly. For more than the system, she added, and then she left. I sat there another 10 minutes. The ficus leaves above me didn't move. They never did, but somehow the room felt lighter. Maybe silence isn't absence. Maybe it's the weight of everything that could be said, but doesn't need to be. Some interns copy code, others copy courage, but only a few learn what both really cost. 3 days passed. No news coverage, no press statements, no apology banners in the break room. Just silence, the kind that settles over a scandal like a corporate fog machine. You know something's burning under the surface, but all you're allowed to see is mist and a memo about infrastructure resilience enhancements. The director? Still employed. The intern? Still present, though rumors swirled she'd been transitioned to a shadow role, whatever that meant. And the inspector? He wasn't done yet. On the 4th day, he requested something unusual, a reenactment, not a full-scale simulation that would have required vendor sign-offs and budget meetings that would rot for weeks, but a forensic walkthrough. Who touched what? When? Where the chain of command broke. The HR team called it a timeline reconstruction. The legal team called it discovery. I called it a rare moment of truth in an office full of noise. I was invited to attend. Voluntarily. No obligation, they said. No pressure. Just helpful context. Their tone was polite. Too polite. The kind of polite that tastes like metal. I showed up 5 minutes late. The meeting room had been rearranged, chairs pushed back, screen already glowing with a map of the storage system's evolution. Phase by phase, build to collapse. The director wasn't at the table. He was standing by the whiteboard, scribbling something halfway between a flowchart and a prayer. The intern was seated, hands in her lap, a water bottle untouched beside her, her face unreadable. And the inspector? Calm as always, flipping through a printed change log like it was light weekend reading. Glad you could make it, he said when I entered. Someone has to, I replied. He smiled, not kindly, not coldly, just knowingly. I'd like to start with the script behavior, he said, specifically the fallback logic coded in Q2 of 2021. I nodded. It was designed to activate automatically if packet loss exceeded 0.8% over a 3-minute window. He tapped the screen. This line here, the trigger, it was commented out in the test branch but never removed from production. Was that intentional? Yes, I said. It was a safeguard, hidden in plain sight. Why not document it in the public-facing architecture? I looked straight at the director, because some people only read what they can present in slides, not what keeps systems breathing when no one's watching. The inspector nodded, made a note, the director shifted. Then came the pivot. Let's talk about the approval process, the inspector said, clicking to another screen. Your departure was documented at 14:20. The collapse started at 17:31. Between those times, the only code pushed was from... He let the pause linger. The intern. Her throat moved as she swallowed, but she said nothing. The screen flicked to the commit log, her initials, her message, final cleanup before sunset, removing legacy clutter. She had deleted the script, but she hadn't merged. The inspector turned. Was that your intention? She inhaled. I thought it had already been copied into the hybrid layer. I didn't know the trigger needed to stay. I didn't understand the... It's okay, he said, surprisingly gentle. That's what we're here for. He then turned to me again. One last thing. He pulled up a chain of custody log. 5 names, 5 approvals, but one stood out, the director's. Your initials appear here, the inspector said flatly, pointing. On the deployment waiver, 1652. The director cleared his throat. Yes, well, I trusted the summary. She assured me the migration was clean. She, the inspector echoed. But you signed it? I assumed it had been reviewed. No log suggests it was. The room fell still, and then a sound I hadn't expected. The inspector closed his file, not with finality, but with precision. "That's all I need," he said. Then he looked at me. "Your system didn't just prevent data loss, it preserved the timeline. That's rare." He stood. The director remained frozen. The intern looked at me, and for the first time, there was no fear in her eyes, just the weight of understanding. Some approvals are signatures, others are blindfolds. And sometimes, the one who walks away is the only one who actually saw. The inspector left the room the way he'd entered it, without a sound, but with everything subtly changed behind him. The director stayed behind, motionless, not from guilt, that would have required a spine, but from calculation. You could almost hear the gears turning behind his eyes, trying to find a narrative where he remained intact. He glanced at the intern. She didn't meet his eyes. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was surgical. Eventually, I stood. I didn't expect a thank you, or an apology. I had stopped looking for those in boardrooms and Zoom tiles a long time ago. But as I walked to the door, the director finally spoke. "You could have told us." I paused. The words hung there, trembling with the weight of absurdity. I turned slowly. "Told you what?" "That the fallback would trigger, that the migration wasn't ready, that she wasn't ready." I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I did tell you. You just heard what you wanted. Confidence, speed, optics." His jaw clenched. "You're making this personal." "No," I said, stepping closer. "You did that when you used my silence as permission." He looked away. Outside the room, the hallway hummed with the low white noise of a building pretending everything was fine. I passed HR. They didn't look up. I passed the finance desk. The same woman who'd once asked me to help her fix a spreadsheet now stared blankly at her screen. People get nervous around quiet reputations, especially when the system proves who built what. As I reached the elevator, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't HR or legal or anyone from the office. It was a name I hadn't seen in years. Diego Ozaz Zurich Storage Group. The message was short. "Saw the incident report. Can we talk? We might need someone who actually knows what redundancy means." I let the elevator doors close without stepping in. Zurich. Neutral turf, international exposure, real budget, and most importantly, autonomy. The offer wasn't official, but in this world, timing said more than paperwork. When storage fails in a public company, heads roll. When it's saved by accident, boards take notice. Back home, I opened the old folder. Archived configs, system logs, my original failover diagram, the one I'd color-coded in 2021 and labeled with unsexy but life-saving. It looked boring, but boring had just saved 14 terabytes of legal records, audit trails, and procurement contracts. Funny how unsexy things survive, how quiet lines of code outlast loud meetings, how some exits echo longer than any speech. That night, I finally responded to the intern's message. "You didn't fail because you tried. You failed because you thought trying meant knowing. You'll learn, but not if you chase applause more than clarity." No signature. She'd know who it was from. I closed the laptop. Outside, the city lights blinked like data centers at night, steady, unseen, keeping the world breathing. Some systems collapse, others catch them, and some walk away, only to build again, smarter. Because not all exits are endings, some are just clean commits. The director called a town hall the following Monday, not to explain, to control. They rebranded the event as a strategic debrief on system resilience. Bold font, clean slides. The word incident used once, delicately, like it might shatter if spoken too loudly. I wasn't invited, of course, but I watched the live stream. My name wasn't mentioned. Neither was hers. But I saw the tension in the director's jaw when the graph of unexpected fallback recovery rates popped up. He attributed the recovery to a legacy asset that performed beyond expectation. Beyond expectation. That phrase did more than sting. It confirmed what I'd always suspected. He never understood that good architecture doesn't surprise, it prepares. At slide 14, the intern appeared. She didn't speak. She clicked forward. Her face carefully neutral, like she'd practiced each expression in a mirror the night before. But I caught it. The flicker. When she presented the new workflow, the revised logic tree, the one clearly rebuilt on my original script, renamed, restyled, rebranded. Her voice quivered on one node. Redundancy conditions must now be verified in both staging and live branches before deprecation is approved. Someone asked, "Is that new?" She paused. Just a second too long. Then, "Yes, it's part of our updated compliance framework." No one challenged her. No one asked who built that logic in the first place. No one said my name. But the system spoke for me. That afternoon, I got another message, this time from Internal Affairs, not the smiling HR team with their branded mugs and tone-policed Slack channels. This was sharper, formal, clinical, titled Request for Informal Technical Review, Fallback Protocol, 17B. I clicked open. The document attached was a technical artifact, my artifact, time-stamped, annotated, untouched since I submitted it 18 months prior, and yet still alive. Beneath the request, a line caught my eye. While you are no longer under contract, your voluntary cooperation will contribute to the accuracy of our findings. It wasn't a threat. It was an invitation to correct the record, quietly, legally, officially, and this time I accepted. The review session wasn't held in a boardroom. It was done over secure video, no faces, just initials. Voice modulation toggled on. The way real accountability works. In the shadows, where logs don't lie and egos can't edit transcripts, they asked smart questions about triggers, about deadlocks, about why I left the auto fallback mechanism live when the migration plan said it was safe to remove. My answer was simple. Because I don't code for best case scenarios, I code for people who forget them. A pause. Then one of the voices said, "That's not company policy." I replied, "No, that's experience." After the call, I stared at my screen for a long time. No praise, no applause, but something better. Peace. I hadn't burned bridges. I had built exits, and sometimes the cleanest exit is the one you don't slam behind you. Sometimes it's the one that stays open, just long enough for truth to follow you out. They can redact names, but not fingerprints, and the system still knows who shaped its bones. Thursday morning, the director sent out a newsletter. Yes, a newsletter, titled Reflections on Leadership, Building Forward from Disruption. It began with a quote. "True leaders aren't defined by moments of ease, but by how they adapt when systems fail." No mention of why the system failed. No mention of whose adaptation had saved it. The email was long, too long, full of floating language like cross-functional synergy, pipeline recalibration, and architecture resilience recentering. Words that looked impressive in bold, but meant nothing under pressure. And yet, attached at the bottom, a single bullet point under team highlights. Legacy fallback protocol credited with data integrity preservation. Credits. Systems team, Q2 2021 initiative. Systems team, not even names, not even mine. Later that afternoon, I received a different message from someone inside facilities, of all places. He was the guy who restocked the printer paper and made sure the elevators didn't trap anyone during fire drills. His email was short. "Hey, thought you might like to know, they took down your nameplate from the server room door this morning. Replaced it with Cloud Operations Staging, property of Infra Team. Didn't feel right not telling you." I sat with that for a while. There's something oddly intimate about a nameplate, small, plastic, screwed into a wall, but it says, someone was here, someone built this, maintained it, protected it, now erased, replaced with something sterile, something neutral, something no one could be blamed for or praised for, ever again. I didn't reply to the director's newsletter, didn't message back the facilities guy, though I made a mental note to thank him someday. But I did write one email to myself. Subject line, note to future projects. Never code safety for applause. Never comment a function hoping it'll get noticed. Just build like no one is watching, because they aren't. But failure always is. I hit send, archived it, not for legacy, for clarity. That night, I passed the building again on a walk. The windows were still lit, a graveyard glow of people working late not because they had to, but because they were scared to leave. The kind of fear that follows a collapse no one wants to admit happened. Across the street, I noticed a familiar figure stepping out. the intern. She wasn't in a blazer this time, just jeans and a hoodie, earbuds in, looking like anyone else in the city. But when she saw me, across traffic, across noise, she stopped, raised a hand. Not a wave, not an apology, just a pause, acknowledgement. And then she turned and walked away, this time without looking back. I kept walking. No nostalgia, no fire, just something lighter. Because for the first time, I realized I didn't need the building. I was the system. And systems, when designed right, don't need a nameplate to be real. Some exits don't slam. They just close, clean, quiet, and fully documented. It took 2 weeks for the board to acknowledge the incident publicly. Not because they were ready, but because the quarterly earnings call left them no choice. Investors don't like surprises, especially not the kind that live in storage failure reports and back-end logs. The official line? A minor infrastructure disruption was handled swiftly, demonstrating our platform's underlying resilience and leadership agility. I almost laughed. Leadership agility? That's what they were calling it now? The same director who hadn't reviewed the code, the same intern who had removed my failover logic, the same HR team that emailed me, "Please return your badge by Friday," as if that was the end of my relevance. Apparently, the system had bounced back not because of design, but because of agility. But reality is rarely so polite. By the end of that week, 3 quiet departures were confirmed on LinkedIn. The head of compliance, pursuing new opportunities. The director of infrastructure, excited for my next chapter. A senior legal officer, simply gone, no update at all. Each exit post polished, corporate, meaningless, each one tagged with 3 emojis or fewer, like grief, in bullet points. But behind the curtain, I knew exactly what had happened. The inspector hadn't just filed a report. He'd opened a full review, one with a chain of custody log, access audit, and a full backup snapshot showing exactly which fallback script had saved the company's neck. My script, my logic, my signature in code. Funny thing about code, it doesn't shout. It doesn't interrupt meetings or win promotions. It just runs, quietly, perfectly, until someone removes it. And when it comes back online, it remembers who wrote it. A recruiter reached out from a firm I'd once applied to and never heard back from. This time, the tone was different. "We've reviewed your past architecture proposals. Would you be open to a conversation about shaping our risk strategy?" I replied with 2 words: send documents. Not because I needed the validation, but because I finally understood the difference between being useful and being respected. I had been useful for years, but now they needed my clarity, my foresight, my paranoia even, and I would give it, but on my terms. Back in my apartment, I unpacked an old cardboard box I hadn't touched since the day I left. Inside, a notebook filled with postmortems, not the official ones, the real ones, written in the margins of printouts on sticky notes on the back of cafeteria napkins. Notes like, "System survived stress test. No one noticed. Director declined redundancy layer due to presentation complexity. Intern asked if logs can be deleted manually. Talk later." I flipped through them, each line a breadcrumb, each oversight a story, each silence a wound, and yet none of it made me bitter, because these notes were mine, not stolen, not sanitized, not reframed for a team slide. There's a peace that comes when you outgrow the space that tried to contain you. When you realize the building didn't elevate you, you stabilized it. And when you left, it wobbled. Not because you made a scene, but because you were the only one holding it upright, and no one noticed until you were gone. The best systems aren't flashy. They're invisible until they're not. And when they fail, they whisper the name of the one who warned them. Months passed. The collapse had become a footnote, a sanitized paragraph buried deep in the quarterly report under operational learnings. No names, no responsibility, no thank yous. But the logs were still there. The inspector's file was still archived, and the system still running, on my logic. The irony never stopped humming. They moved on, using what they once dismissed, protected by a mechanism they didn't know existed, because they never read past the bullet points. I took the Zurich call in early spring. The recruiter had followed up, politely persistent, offering specifics, not vague promises, but actual frameworks, actual autonomy, actual respect. The phrase that got me? We want someone who doesn't just fix things. We want someone who warns us before they break. That was all I needed. No rock star, no ninja, just clarity. Finally. My last day in the city was quiet. I passed the old building one final time, not to revisit, but to remind myself what I survived. Outside, a new poster clung to the glass. Rebuilding trust through technology. Trust. The same trust they revoked when they overlooked, doubted, rebranded. Inside, someone was giving a tour. I saw her, the intern, walking beside a new group of hires. She gestured toward the server wing, her expression calm, confident, restrained. She'd grown. She caught my eye through the glass, just for a second. No nod, no wave, just recognition, and that was enough. I boarded my flight with a single carry-on and a backup drive. Inside it, notes, fragments, and one very simple script. Not code. A sentence I wrote on a text file labeled legacy.md. Document everything. Build quietly. They'll either use it or lose without it. Zurich was colder, cleaner, quieter. The new office didn't feel like an office. It felt like a lab. No pinging Slack threads. No passive-aggressive calendars named mandatory joy sync. Just problems. Real ones. And people who listened before deciding. I walked past their data room the first week. On the wall, a small plaque. This system contains logic contributed by external architects whose foresight protected integrity during failure. They didn't know it was me, but that's the point. I wasn't trying to be remembered. I was trying to leave things better than I found them, even if it meant leaving without credit, even if it meant staying silent while others clapped. Because quiet systems don't beg for applause. They just work. And when they don't, they remember who warned them. The exit wasn't the end. It was the proof.